Hello and welcome to the Pitt Mailbag Show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're your hosts, Chris Carter and Stephen Thompson, your Pitt beat writers here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can find all of our written work at post-gazette.com. You can find us here on the Post-Gazette's YouTube page as well as on all your favorite podcasting apps by searching for the Post-Gazette Sports to get all of our Tuesday episodes of the Pitt Mailbag Show. Stephen, it is the final week of training camp for Pitt football, which now means we are less than 2 weeks away from the season opener where Pitt takes on Kent State for, thank the heavens, a noon kickoff. We have noon kickoffs. Thank you, God. I so appreciate that because I was driven nuts by how we didn't have any last year. But anyway, Steven, how you doing?
I'm doing well. You know, the only thing is, so we get a noon kickoff for the Kent State game, but that's the same time as Georgia Clemson and Penn State West Virginia's kicking off. So we are going to miss some of the marquee matchups, but I think I'd definitely rather be at Pitt Kent State than I guess at home watching those games. You know, who could possibly want to miss that third marquee matchup, the Golden Flashes and the Panthers at Acrisure Stadium?
Absolutely. But big question that everyone has, and we'll kick it off, is what's the offense going to be looking like, and specifically at quarterback. James sent in a question for us. By the way, you can always DM us or email us if you either on Twitter or hit us up on our Post-Gazette emails if you'd like to get a question in on the show. But James asks, is Nate Yarnell still the definite starting quarterback, or has Eli Holstein made the race tight? Stephen, this is a good question because there's been some speculation, especially when Pitt puts out certain highlights when they're showing the scrimmages and everything like that, and people see Eli Holstein throwing to certain receivers. What do you make of this QB race, and is this a whole bunch of hoopla for nothing at the end of the day?
No, I don't think it's a whole lot of hoopla for nothing. I think James is onto something here. The wind has definitely shifted a little bit. I think at the beginning of camp when we talked about the quarterback race, I think Nate Yarnell kind of had a stranglehold on that starting quarterback job. It doesn't really seem like that's the case anymore. It seems like the race is a little bit more wide open. The last time we heard from Pat Narduzzi, he did say that Nate was still currently, and I guess what we've heard from Mike Tomlin all offseason about a pole position. He is kind of still leading that race, but it's not a guarantee that he's going to be the QB1 come week one against Kent State. It's a little more up in the air. I think Eli Holstein, who had a little bit of a hamstring injury, if I remember correctly, from the spring ball, has gotten a little bit healthier, and with that has shown a lot more. He's been able to use his athleticism, his speed, and he's been able to kind of command this offense a little bit more efficiently as he's learned it a little bit more. So the race is certainly tighter. The scrimmage that the Panthers had yesterday, their final scrimmage at training camp before they round out camp and head into game week, I think will go or definitely did go a long way in determining who's going to be that guy come week one. In stadium opportunities, as they call them, that scrimmage was at Acrisure Stadium. Those experiences, those opportunities go a longer way than, say, if you were than your average 11-on-11 period in the middle of practice. So we're going to get some interesting answers from Pat Narduzzi tomorrow. I don't know if he's going to if he has made a decision or if he's going to make a decision anytime soon. But I think that he will be a lot closer to a decision than he was before that scrimmage, say on Saturday or the last time we talked to him. So I think things are nearing a conclusion, but this race is decidedly tighter than it was when camp began. Eli Holstein has come on pretty strong by the sound of it, and Yarnell is going to have to do some real work to solidify his spot as a starter.
I do think this might be the case, is that Pitt saw what happened last year when they overly committed to a quarterback that they thought was their QB1, and then it turned out he wasn't the best quarterback, nor was the second guy who they thought was the best quarterback. So maybe there's some open-mindedness here. And it's also a new offensive coordinator. Like Pat Narduzzi is the head coach of this team, and what he says goes at the end of the day. But they just had the worst offense in all of the ACC, and Cade Bell was brought in to help fix that. And I can't imagine that Cade Bell wouldn't want to try to fix that by putting the person that he thinks is best out there. And again, maybe it is Nate Yarnell. The thing is, we don't get to see all of practice. We get to see certain portions of practice. So our view is much more limited than, say, like if we were covering the Steelers, where they let you watch all of practice, especially all of training camp. Heck, we can report what's going on all of training camp. So it's a limited perspective there. But I do think that there's smoke to the idea that Eli Holstein could be pushing Nate Yarnell. That's why they brought him in as a transfer. And I think Eli Holstein was looking for an opportunity to play when he came to Pitt, and it seems like maybe he's getting a chance to at least prove himself in this QB battle. So that'll be something that we keep our mind out for here. Let's talk more about other positions on offense. KG asks us, who's standing out at running back? Now, Steven, the running back position kind of is a complicated one because you got one Rodney Hammond who didn't have a great year last year, but is clearly the top running back from the previous team. But then you have Desmond Reed, who's brought in, who knows the Western Carolina offense, we've talked to him, and he's talked about how he's been helping players learn the playbook and understand what their roles are. But then you also have a guy like Derek Davis, who transferred to the team a year ago and switched positions and has been figuring things out. And then you have young guys. You also have an older guy like Daniel Carter. Who's the standout guy right now for you at running back?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clearly Desmond Reed. It's a guy that the coaching staff hasn't been able to stop talking about really since he arrived, since spring camp began. I think his knowledge of the offense really helps, but I think his speed does too. He has home run hitting ability in a way that very few guys on this roster do have. I think when I was going into camp, Rodney Hammond seemed like the top guy as well. It seemed like he and Reed were going to split carries, but now that I think Rodney's maybe fading a little bit, and I think the fact that Derek Davis has come on a little bit stronger, I think finding his footing a little bit more as a running back contributed to that as well. It seems like there is, I guess, more separation between Reed and the rest of the pack, and then it's kind of everyone else fighting for snaps beyond that. That said, there's probably going to be a lot of snaps to go around. I haven't done the math out specifically, but I think it's pretty obvious that this Pitt team is going to move a lot faster than its previous iterations. If they got 60 snaps per game last year, they might get something closer to 80 or 75. So there'll be a lot more playing time just on its own to go around. So it's not like even if Rodney Hammond or Derek Davis is relegated to an RB2 job, that they won't see the field at all. There will be plenty of chances for them to prove what they can do in this offense and maybe even move up the depth chart. Who knows? But I think the fact that we have heard nothing but good things about Desmond Reed throughout training camp and spring ball tells us pretty clearly who the top guy is in that running back room, and it's Desmond Reed.
Last time Pitt had a serious threat at running back, it was a guy that was a home run hitter, and the name is Izzy Abanaconda. And Desmond Reed might be a lot closer to that than a Rodney Hammond. I think Rodney Hammond's still a guy that can grind out games, can play that, but Cade Bell's offense isn't your old school Pat Narduzzi Big Ten type of offense. It's meant to be fast, flying, quick, and use the running backs in the passing game. And Desmond Reed, I think, very much fits that. And so I think there's going to be, I think even if Rodney Hammond is per se the starter, for Pitt's offense, I don't think it will be a hefty split between the carries or the overall snaps that are used between the teams, because to me, in today's college football world, especially, I mean, this also for the NFL, but especially in college football, whether or not you are officially the quote unquote starter doesn't matter as much as who gets the most snaps on the field, because some teams want to start with a certain running back out there, but there's another player who they wheel out and gets just as many snaps and maybe gets more touches in a game. That's where I think this could come down to. Rodney Hammond might be the guy who comes out on first down, they hand the ball off to, he pounds away, and he wears down an opposing defense. But then Desmond Reed comes in and is the really fast back that once they're worn down, maybe they're a little bit slower in their thinking, he takes off and hits a big play. But either way, I do agree that Desmond Reed is going to be a major part of this offense, or at least attempt to be a major part of this offense. I also think Derek Davis is the closest other veteran that fits that kind of play style. He's really fast. He's big. He can make those types of plays. I think that's where both of them might have an edge on a Rodney Hammond. And there's also young guys like Montrevious Lloyd and Jules Goff. Those are two guys who have the speed as well, and at least look like they did in the blue gold games. So I'll be interested to see what they prioritize at running back as when we actually get to see them play real football.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see in that first game how the snaps get divided up against Kent State. I do kind of expect Reed to be the first guy that they trot out there, but I also think there are some different skill sets, some different body types on this roster in the running backs room that K-Bell will be able to play around with, short, third and short situations. You might see more Rodney Hammond or even Daniel Carter. But on obvious passing downs, it seems like Desmond Reed is maybe the better pass catcher, and he'll be better suited for that situation as well. So lots to be determined still. It's really like a lot of things. We're not going to know how it's going to shake out for the rest of the season until we actually see this offense on the field against a different opponent on game day on August 31st.
Absolutely. We'll get to our next question here. It comes from Erwin. How many true freshmen actually see the field this year? Talking about true freshmen on Pitt football, we presume there, because there's Brandon Cummings on the basketball team, and
does also say field, so it does not say court.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good observation. Look at you using your detective powers there. But let's go over this. So there's quite a few true freshmen on this team, by the way. Like this is not a small class to be dealing with here. But I feel like, Steven, there are some obvious names that stick out, especially some 4-star prospect names that stick out that should be in the front of this line, but maybe some others too.
Yeah, I think the defensive line, especially, there's a combination of guys who were former 4-star recruits, blue chip guys, and then also occupy a position of need. Thinking primarily about Francis Brew and Sincere Edwards, a couple of guys that we've talked a ton about this training camp and even before going back to spring ball. But Brew is just this kind of freak of nature, a super strong guy, unnaturally strong for a true freshman. And I think it's pretty clear that he's going to see the field and see the field quite a bit, playing defensive tackle at a spot that has a lot of snaps up for grabs. And I think the same thing is true for Sincere Edwards, who Pat Narduzzi said has been a little banged up during training camp, but they're getting him healthy slowly but surely. He plays defensive end, where there's really only one guy that you could pencil in or set in stone as a starter, and that's Nate Matlack, the graduate transfer from Kansas State. There are a ton of other snaps up for grabs on a defense that's going to be rotating, a defensive line, that's going to be rotating through guys a lot. So Brew and Edwards, I'd say, are your leading candidates to a lesser extent. I think, Jashir Whittington may also be in the mix as well, but defensive line, I think, is where it's going to be most heavily those true freshmen playing the most.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to talk about this from the perspective of things are different with college football, because for years we've covered it. We've also just watched it, and teams would hide their true freshmen. They'd be like, no, they need to get ready for it. But especially talented players, guys that are high-ranked prospects, teams are getting them on the field faster. And why? Because the transfer portal is a thing. And if a player doesn't play and they feel like they have a question of playing the next year, they might dip. They might be like, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere that values me, that puts me on the field, that sees that I'm a talented guy. Players want to see the field faster, and I think that that's absolutely part of the equation right now. But to get specifically into some of these players that you were mentioning here, I definitely look at the defensive linemen. It's tough to ignore the potential of, Francis Brew, who just looks like a tank when he walks around Pitt's football field. And I mean, it is freakish how jacked that kid looks. But you can't ignore Jahsir Whittington. He was like the first major 4-star guy to commit to Pitt of this group. And there's 4 of these guys, right? Like this isn't just 1 or 2 guys. Francis is one, Jahsir is one, Sincere is one, and then you have Cam Lindsey. And frankly, I think all 4 might be in position to see decent time this year. Now, here's the one thing about Cam Lindsey. The linebacker room, as you wrote this weekend in your feature story, go read that if you guys haven't, by the way, post-gazette.com. But this linebacker room is maybe the deepest it's been in a very long time, maybe ever under Pat Narduzzi. And it's not just, some 6-year seniors and some holdovers that have been hanging around like, Johnny Patrician and Phil Campbell, who were really good, but were 6th-year guys who were kind of holding over in the COVID years. These are now redshirt sophomores and true sophomores that have been waiting their turn, that are young, explosive, fast, and very much fit the profile of what Pitt recruits to be their linebacker positions. There's at least 6 guys that I think are ready to go. And then there's Cam Lindsey. And if Cam Lindsey, if he's flying around, we've seen him get some props from coaches for what he's done in some of these training camp practices. Maybe they find a way to get him on there too, because he's another guy that I think could be really, really good for Pitt football. So if I'm looking at the upper tier of guys that I think definitely get a shot, I think Francis Brew was too strong to deny. I think he gets put in there. I think we've heard enough about Sincere Edwards being a factor and how Edge doesn't have as many definitive spots there or players there yet. I think that he fits in there. I wonder about Jahsir Whittington because he's not as he doesn't look as fully jacked as, say, a Francis does. And to me, that might play into the idea that, well, Pitt also went and got a guy like Nick James, a guy like Anthony Johnson. They still have Nakai, they still have Sean. They have defensive tackles who I think they expect to kind of be there. So maybe Jahsir falls to the back of that rotation and they try to play him a little bit, but not enough to make him burn a red shirt. But again, it might come down to, does Pat Narduzzi feel like they need to get these guys out there so that they don't lose them to the transfer portal?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time in college football. I think you make a good point. It's not even, I think it's about not losing guys and making sure they feel valued and that they get enough playing time to feel like they are a part of something here. But also, there's really no sense in if you think a guy might transfer, if there's any possibility of that, there's no sense in saving one of their years of eligibility if you think eventually they're just going to use that at a different school. Even if a guy might not be there for very long, you might as well play him as many games as you can make room for because, he can't take that. You can't take that when he leaves. And speaking about Cam Lindsey too, I think the most telling thing, I think I agree with you. He's going to see the field in some capacity, whether that's, more on special teams versus defense. I mean, we've seen freshman linebackers like Rasheem Biles make impacts on special teams before, especially last year, and big ones, big impacts at that. But I think the most telling thing that we heard from Pat Narduzzi this training camp was that Cam Lindsey is athletically and physically ready to play Division I college football, which is not always the case for guys who come in and are spending their first year at the Division I level. I think it's pretty rare to find true freshmen who are physically and athletically ready to handle the rigors of college football straight out of high school. So I think Cam Lindsey's also a pretty smart kid, so he'll be able to pick up the playbook fast enough to eventually, maybe it's not right away, but I think deep into ACC play, he'll have a real chance to see some snaps and see them pretty quickly. That's assuming that there aren't even any injuries that pop up at key spots that would open up opportunities for him. I think by his own merit, Cam Lindsey is a guy who will see the field on his own. I'd even throw Davin Bruton in there too. He's another one that we heard will see the field in some capacity, whether that's special teams or defense. There are probably at least half a dozen true freshmen from this class who you will see on the field pretty regularly for the Panthers this season.
I certainly think that there's a good chance that you're going to see a lot of younger guys playing. And let's face it, also another factor here, the COVID years are gone. Well, not gone. They're still technically
A lot
there.
of them are.
Yeah, but the generation of COVID is almost out of college. I think that technically, next year might be the last year that that people who were played during the COVID season of 2020 are eligible to have that season wiped out that could still be in college football. But on this team alone, I think Brandon George, Key Thompson, I think those might be the only guys that fit that that narrative as far or have been around. Or I guess there's Jason Collier, there's other Nate Temple guys like that as well. But by the by, that generation is going out, which means younger players are going to get more chances on college football across the board. But let's switch to college basketball real quick before we get out of here, because we have people have been wondering about the Pitt Panthers on the hoop court, and that's Marvin who asked this question, who says, if Jeff Capel doesn't land Meleek Thomas next year, who are the big targets for Pitt basketball? Now, if you are familiar with all of our coverage at post-gazette.com, Steven's been running the recruitment report for the past month and a half, 2 months. It's month and a half, right? Because you started.
Yeah, month and a half. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Look at us there. Now, when I was doing the recruitment report before that, Steven, I remember Meleek Thomas was the big story, but there were certainly other names that Pitt was locking in who were really good prospects. Not top 5 in the country overall like Meleek Thomas, but they were targeting big players, and especially at the guards positions.
Yeah, I think you look at kind of just generally the scholarship count or the roster right now, guard should be a priority. Ishmael Leggett and Jalen Lowe, those are two guys who seem like this might be their last year in college basketball for different reasons. Same thing for Damian Dunn. The Panthers have brought in a couple freshman guards, Oswald Olalik and Brandon Cummings, but they'll still need to kind of restock that position a little bit. So Meleek Thomas is obviously the white whale. That's the one everyone's thinking about. He's the biggest name, but there's a lot of competition for him, at least among them. UConn, the reigning national champions, Arkansas, who has not only a connection to Thomas with John Calipari, who recruited him when he was at Kentucky, but also some massive NIL backing that you got to consider as well. And a bunch of other really strong programs too, blue bloods, teams with a lot of history and some, let's face it, better recent success than Pitt. So you kind of got to face the reality that they might not land Meleek Thomas, as strong as his connection to Pitt might be. But like you said, there's still plenty of really talented and sought-after prospects that are considering the Panthers and considering them really strongly. I think the top guys on that list are Amari Evans and Derek Dixon. You wrote about Amari Evans a while back, but four-star guy from Pittsburgh, and then Derek Dixon, another four-star from the D.C. area, plays at Powerhouse Gonzaga High School down there. Both of those guys have taken a couple of visits out to Pitt. They've seen the Panthers in person, and Pitt has been recruiting them for years. So I think those are kind of the top two guys on their list right now. The Panthers are, I wouldn't say taking a step back from recruiting those guys, but I think they are kind of exploring other options after kind of saying, we've seen the Panthers, we know what we need to know about them, let's see what my other options are. Dixon, I think, has added Arizona and North Carolina to his list. I think he has a couple of visits scheduled for them this fall. Amari Evans will be playing with Meleek Thomas at Overtime Elite down in Atlanta this year, and has a few other blue blood schools. But both these guys named Pitt to top schools lists. They've taken visits, so I'd consider Pitt really strong contenders for those two guys. And then kind of further down the list are two others, Isaiah Dennis and Amari Witherspoon. Dennis is a four-star guy. Put Pitt in his top schools list, I believe, last week or earlier this month. And then he also has a visit scheduled for Labor Day weekend out to Pittsburgh, so we see them in person real soon. Witherspoon's a three-star guard from the D.C. area. He just got offered very recently. I believe it was the end of July when he got offered. But he also kept the Panthers in a top schools list that he released this month. So those guys, I would say, not as strong a contenders with Pitt. Evans and Dixon are the names that you really want to watch right now. I think the only question is how many of these guys they'll be able to take. Are they going to want to take? Like I said, they've got Dolalich, they've got Cummings, but they will also have 2 extra scholarships going into the 2025 season with the NCAA House settlement that expanded scholarship limits for men's basketball teams. They will have 15 instead of 13. Panthers don't really know how they're going to use those yet, or at least they're not sharing with us how they're going to use those scholarships. So that's another thing to watch as well, is just how much bigger these recruiting classes may or may not get. They have some options for how they can use those scholarship limits, that extra room on the scholarship limit, whether it's an extra high school guard or another transfer portal guy, or maybe giving an extra scholarship to a walk-on who's been around the program and kind of earned that spot, remains to be seen. But there are at least 4 guys that I would consider relatively strong leans, or at least contenders for the Panthers, with Evans and Dixon at the top of that list.
I hear you on that. I think that, because I have written about Evans. Dixon has been in play for a bit. I think the really good thing of Pitt here is that they have real shots, or it would appear to be real shots at top tier guys if they don't hit their big shot on Meleek Thomas. I covered them for a different outlet back when they were in the big Efton Reed chase. And Efton Reed was that guy, that center they were down to the wire, looked like they were just about to get him, and then suddenly at the last second, the announcements change times, and then he goes to Florida, and that leads to this Pitt missing out. And they didn't have I think an adequate backup plan. So if you don't get this super 5-star guy, maybe you can get some 4-star guys. And it seems like with this plan, that even if they don't land a Meleek Thomas, they can if they still land a Dixon or an Evans or even Isaiah Dennis, they have options, especially at the guard position. Because I think one thing, and I've written about this before as well, Pitt is in a position where I think that they have a lot of forwards they can count on for the near future. You brought in Cam Corrin this year from the transfer portal. You got Amdi's back. You got Papa Conte. You got forwards lined up that I think can give you depth for a while. But you just saw Bub Carrington go to the NBA in one season. Ishmael Leggett's gone after this season. If Jalen Lowe has a Bub Carrington-like year, I wouldn't be shocked if he was gone after this season. Granted, he doesn't have the length of Carrington, so that might be a different thing for the NBA draft. But you have to account for those type of things. You do have Brandon Cummings in the pipeline, but if you get a superstar scoring guard to pair long-term with either Lowe for the next couple years or Cummings for the next couple years, that could really continue the train that I think Jeff Capel could have started. And heck, if you somehow do land Meleek Thomas and he's gone for another, he's definitely going to be gone in 1 year with the way that he's expected to play. Even landing another one of these guys on top of Thomas could go a long way for showing, hey, Pitt is one of those schools, like you said, where people like Meleek Thomas look for. This place produces NBA talent and guys that do well in the NBA. I think that's the thing that Jeff Capel's trying to put together.
Absolutely. I think he's, I would say it's underrated, the kind of work he's done, being able to develop professional guys, whether it's the NBA or also, sending guys overseas. Like some of Pitt's best players from the past 2 years have ended up playing overseas, not necessarily gone to the NBA. So don't underrate what kind of value those guys can have, especially if they spend multiple years in the program. But, I think Jeff Capel finally has some evidence to back up his belief that he can develop guys, and that's going to play, like Bub Carrington getting drafted. He's on, national television, hugging Jeff Capel after he gets taken in the NBA lottery. Like that is going to go a long way with some more elite prospects. The world and the depth of recruits that Jeff Capel is able to pursue now is decidedly different than the pool that he was able to pull from when he first arrived at Pitt. And that's huge. It raises the ceiling of this program significantly. And like we said, it doesn't have to be Meleek Thomas. It doesn't have to be an obvious one and done guy. If you look back, Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe were not particularly highly rated. I mean, they were both 4-star players, but in the world of college basketball, those aren't as elite as necessarily a 4-star football product. So those guys were not heavily recruited dudes, but they ended up being some massively impactful players for the Panthers. So don't underrate what kind of consolation prizes an Evans or a Dixon could be for the Panthers if they miss out on Meleek Thomas.
Absolutely. He's Stephen Thompson. I'm Chris Carter. Follow both of our works at post-gazette.com to get all of our Pitt basketball and Pitt football coverage, as well as Abby Schnabel with all her Pitt coverage, as well as Pitt volleyball's been getting underway. We got a full slate of team here covering Pitt athletics as we are down to the final week of Pitt football training camp. And then next week, it's the first week of college football. We'll have it all covered for you here, and we'll have our mailbag here next Tuesday here, just like you found this one on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all the daily content from all our Pittsburgh sports writers, from Chris and Steven. We'll see you again next week when it's week 1 of the college football season. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.